standing in front of a crowd with a light on me. I was hooked. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Nobody in our business makes it by themselves.
Welcome to Sports Media Behind the Scenes with Dave Colbert. Hey, that's me. I didn't want to start a podcast, but the judge said it was part of my sentencing. What are you going to do? On this podcast, we take you inside the press box, live truck, control room, and locker room with veterans of the sports and media biz, and I'm a member of that club as well. I'm a longtime TV producer, video editor, and long list of other creative gigs. My guest today, it is Rich Hollenberg. I got to work with Rich a few times in Fort Lauderdale during his Emmy-winning work as a pre- and post-game host for the Tampa Bay Rays. He's been covering that team since way back in 2014. I think that was the dead ball era. I'm not sure. He's also done some real news work covering the Aaron Hernandez case. I want to ask him about that. He's also been a college basketball play-by-play guy on ESPN, working with the legendary Dick Vitale. Currently, Rich is the founder and host of the Break-In and Breakthrough Sportscaster Training Program. It is my pleasure to welcome in Rich Hollenberg.
Dave, it's good to visit with you. It's been too long, and I only needed to listen to that introduction to be reminded of the dulcet tones.
Thank you so much. A face for radio, one of my earliest incarnations. But yeah, I'm having fun with this and getting to talk to some people who've been around. Let's talk about your current mentorship and this program. What are you trying to do? How did this get started? And what are you learning along the way from your students?
I appreciate you asking. I appreciate you having me on because I'm a sports TV geek, like a lot of us in this industry. So I love chopping it up with people like you about the ins and outs of the business. And that was one thing that I was doing during COVID. 5+ years ago, I was sitting on my hands like everybody. No games to call, no shows to host, not quite sure what the future was going to hold. And I had a number of people in college reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, if you have some free time, would you mind taking a look at my demo reel? Would you mind looking over my resume? Would you mind having a conversation about the business and about the future of the business?" And just being in touch with my closest friend from Syracuse, I was always telling him how much fun I had in those interactions. And I describe him as a serial entrepreneur. He's always coming up with great ideas. Um, and he said, I think there could be a business here. And I, just like so many people in our industry, have imposter syndrome. And I was like, who the hell would want to hear what I have to say about sportscasting? And he said, dude, you've been in it for 25+ years already. Like, you've been through the trials and the tribulations. You've seen the heights and the lows, and you've made the mistakes and had the successes. I think there's something there. And so we set about very intentionally and methodically putting together a program that had to fit a few standards that I felt comfortable with before we brought it out to the mass public. And one of the most important things was I didn't want it based solely on talent because I knew there were so many people out there who were talented but didn't know how to get started. So that was one. I didn't want to base it on talent alone. The second one was I wanted to make it as universal as possible. So I wanted to welcome in people who wanted to be play by play announcers just as much as people who wanted to be reporters and correspondents, just as much as the people who wanted to be anchors and hosts. And the reason I wanted to do that was I did and still do all of those things. So I knew from my experiences that there were a lot of common threads, common ties that bind all of those different disciplines in sportscasting. But there aren't any classes out there that talk about that or that teach on that level. The one thing that I knew from my time as a sportscaster on the come up was the one thing that was lacking more than anything. And that was the third pillar that I based this program on, and that is critical feedback or the lack thereof. I did not get it nearly as much as I needed it when I was growing up and coming up in the business. And what I realized was the higher you ascended in the industry, the harder it was to find that critical feedback. So, based on all of those things, we hammered out a program that is 6 weeks long that certainly covers everything that a sportscaster wants to know about being on air, but there are other important factors that go into it that are just as valuable if you want to, and I use air quotes, make it in this business. Because at the end of the day, Dave, you know this just as well as I do. Success is not just fleeting, but it's unique to each and every one of us. Joe Buck and Ian Eagle and Jim Nance and Mike Tirico, those are the one percenters. That's the very, very height of our profession. But that's just 1% of us. The rest of us, and I count myself among these people proudly, I call us grinders. And you have to fall in love with the grind, and you have to really love the the um the hard work that it takes to do this as a career and as a craft. And so we have been very fortunate that the feedback that we've gotten from giving the critical feedback that you get in the cohort has been overwhelmingly positively received. And 4 years down the road, I have over 250 alumni, and we're growing and learning and counting the wins along the way every 6 weeks that the cohort runs.
What are the ages of these students, these mentees? You know, are they kids starting college, out of college? Maybe they're 25 plus, still trying to figure it out.
Great question. I thought it was initially going to be exactly that. What I was pleasantly surprised to find out was as we've gone along, it's been generally a 50-50 split. Mostly the 150% comes from college. Mostly the other 50% comes from people who are in the young stages of their career.
Young professionals.
But what I've also been really pleasantly surprised with is the fringes. I've taken a handful or more of high school students, and I've also taken people who are in their 40s, who either were in the business and got out and want to figure out a way to get back in, or people who are a little bit older because they have quote unquote real jobs, but do sportscasting as a hobby and want to figure out how they can make it more of a full time occupation. The high schoolers, I used to discount them because I thought no one in high school is advanced enough to really understand and apply what we're talking about in the cohort. And I was proven wrong. In this day and age with streaming and everything else that's at their fingertips, there are plenty of high schoolers who are more than qualified to learn and appreciate what we're talking about.
So it's a bit of a home makeover, but you're going to help them get better, hone their skills, fine tune, and give them some critical feedback that maybe they're not getting from the news director in the hundredth market.
100% accurate. What I have found, good and bad, and to be honest with you, Dave, mostly bad, is the only time you hear from the bosses is when you've done something wrong. You don't get pats on the back all the time. And by the same token, pats on the back don't really help you get better. So, what's that middle ground? What's that common ground? The common ground is critical feedback. And you have to develop a thick skin in this business. Critical feedback helps you do that. You have to learn how to improve your strengths and how to strengthen your weaknesses. Critical feedback helps you do that too. And I think it's the bedrock of what everybody should aspire to, which is to constantly be curious about getting better all the time. I tell everyone I mentor, as much as I tell my own children, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's not necessarily comfortable having a conversation with someone and saying, here's what I think you need to improve on, instead of what everyone's used to in this day and age of social media, which is heart shaped emojis and thumbs ups and likes and wow, that's so cool and go get them and attaboy and way to go, girl. That is nice for our egos, but it doesn't help us improve the craft.
Is there maybe a case study of someone you worked with where, the right coaching, the right mentorship brought them from, a C plus to an A plus, or something that you really unlocked their full potential?
fortunately, there are more than a couple. One is a young lady by the name of Madison Kay. On the air, she's Madison Little. Maddie came to me as a UCF student, and she is now a sideline reporter at ESPN covering ACC sports, football, basketball, you name it. That's one that instantly comes to mind. Another one which shows you how valuable the skill sets are ancillary to actual sportscasting is Keith Rad. Keith started with me when he was still calling Brooklyn Cyclones games, which for all the New York listeners and viewers here would know that that is an affiliate of the New York Mets. Well, it wasn't because of what I taught Keith as a broadcaster that ultimately got him this job, but now, a year after he took my cohort, Keith is the radio voice of the New York Mets.
Wow, good gig.
I take absolutely no credit for that. I knew when he joined the Break It and Breakthrough community that he was uber talented. And when I watched his and listened to his demo reel, I told him that. I said, there's really not much I'm going to be able to teach you, but there were things, and Keith pointed it out to me more than I pointed it out to him. He was stuck in terms of networking and reaching out to people and building and cultivating and nurturing relationships in the industry.
Yeah, so vital.
It was really gratifying to see the leap that he was able to take because I knew he had the chops to do it. He just needed a little push. And fortunately, according to Keith, Break In and Breakthrough was able to give him that push.
Is there one or two things that stand out that tend to be the most common issues that young broadcasters face at when they come to you? What are kind of the biggest things that you're seeing a lot?
The biggest things, hands down, are confidence and clarity. I tend to group things by alliteration because they're easier for me to remember. Confidence is the overwhelming one. Most people, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier that I suffer from still to this day, 30 years down the road in my career, imposter syndrome. Everybody thinks at some point or another, sometimes more, sometimes less, that it's just a matter of time before somebody calls me out and says, "You've been posing this entire time, and I'm calling you on it, and you're out of here." And I still feel that. That insecurity, that anxiety, the nervousness, the uncertainty that you are being received the way you want to be received when you're on air. I am very proud about the fact that I don't guarantee jobs once you come through the cohort. What I guarantee you is you will leave this program feeling more confident in your abilities than you ever have before. And that's the one thing that I learned from the cohort members very quickly. I thought, I'm going to teach them the skills that it takes. They're going to have a really sturdy journalist toolbox when they get done with me and this cohort. And yes, they do. But by far, the one thing that I learned more than anything was they needed a place to come to feel more confident. And it's not just me who's teaching them that, it's a virtue of being part of a community and feeling and then knowing that I'm not alone in this because nobody in our business makes it by themselves. You know, you talk to my parents and they'll be like, "Oh, Richie did it all by himself." And nothing could be farther from the truth. I stand on the shoulders of my professors from Syracuse and the mentors who I had who were doing what I wanted to do ahead of me. And now I still stand on the shoulders of the colleagues who I now fortunately get to call friends and associates and coworkers. It takes a village, and that's a cliche, but cliches are called cliches because there's a certain degree of truth to them, and that one certainly is true.
Yeah, the media business is certainly a team sport. I mean, people see you with the fancy suit and, doing the post-game interview, and there's 50 other people on the crew that are working just as hard, probably harder, Rich, to be honest, you know? Let's go back to the beginning. Before Syracuse, when you were a kid, I'm interested in what I call the Peter Parker origin story. What was it that kind of made you wide-eyed and say, "Well, I'm really interested in going down that path," maybe when you're 8 or 10 or whatever it was?
You nailed it. I was 7 years old when my parents, as a Hanukkah gift, bought my sister and me Donny and Marie microphones.
Were you a little bit country or a little bit rock and roll? Which one were you?
I was a little bit rock and roll, but, at that point, it was all about the feeling that I had with that microphone in my hand, even as a 7-year-old. Fast forward a few years, my sister is getting bat mitzvahed, and my parents say, "Richie loves being in front of a crowd. He'll MC the bat mitzvah." And I said yes and had a blast, and the feedback, going back to that word, the interaction and the feedback that I got from standing in front of a crowd with a light on me, I was hooked. And all that time, I was, of course, a huge sports fan. I also happened to be the tallest kid in my grade all the way up until 8th grade. And then everyone caught up to me and passed me. And that's when I realized, okay, I don't have a career in professional sports, but how do I stick around sports so that I don't have to have a 9 to 5 job and sit behind a desk all day? And when I was young, I went to a sleepaway camp, a sports camp. And the head counselor of that sports camp was a guy by the name of Gary Barnaba. And Gary knew that I loved sports and that I loved television. And he said, it's not just Syracuse has a great basketball team, Syracuse also has a great broadcasting program. And I was like, "Okay, why are you telling me this?" He said, "Well, who are your favorite sportscasters?" And I said, "Bob Costas, Marv Albert." And he said, "Well, both of them went to the Newhouse School at Syracuse." So as a 13-year-old, I had my course charted. I was like, "Okay, guess I'm going there. That's what I'm going to do, and that's what I want to be when I grow up." And fortunately, I was able to stay on that path. I always tell people everyone's got their own origin story, to use your phrase. Everyone has their own path to success. There is no one yellow brick road that every sportscaster follows to find their success. Mine was really circuitous, maybe even more so than most, but I knew where I needed to start, and that was Syracuse. And fortunately, I knew that from a very young age. That's not to say that if you're watching or listening to this right now and you're 13, you're like, "Oh crap, I need to figure this out right away." I just happen to be that young and that dumb to decide at that age that that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I think those of us who pursued our youthful, folly dreams and found a career in that, I think we're lucky. I think, I feel blessed that I went down the road that I wanted to, and, it's been has its ups and downs, of course, but I feel blessed by that. So take me into your Syracuse years. How did you, get on camera, get on mic? What were you doing to kind of, get your reps?
I love that you use that term reps because I always tell people that is by far the most important thing. There's nothing I can say or anyone can say to you that will be more valuable than you going out and doing it yourself. I wish I knew that when I was a freshman at Syracuse. I looked around and said, I call it my holy moment. There are a bunch of people here that want to do the same thing I did. How am I going to set myself apart? At that stage, Dave, I didn't know I wanted to do play by play. I just knew I wanted to be a sportscaster. Probably if you forced my hand, I would have told you then I want to be on SportsCenter, because at that point, SportsCenter was the end all be all. It was the apex, it was the pinnacle, it was everything to every sports fan. Now it's a little bit different than that, but back then, 30 years ago, it was. And so I said, I need to get on TV so that I could ultimately be on SportsCenter. I wasn't looking to do the games like at WAER, which is our student run radio station. And it has turned out the best of the best. I named two of them already. Marv Albert was at AER. Bob Costas was at AER. And then the list goes on and on and on. Tirico, Sean McDonough, Ian Eagle. I mean, literally, it's a laundry list of who's who in the industry. But I wasn't one of those names because I didn't know I wanted to do play by play. I just wanted to be on TV. So I joined what was then called UUTV. It's now known as Citrus TV. And Syracuse was fantastic that way with extracurriculars. In classes, I was nailing my head against the wall because they don't let freshman and sophomore on camera. You have to learn how to write. You have to learn how to do the jobs around the broadcast before you get on the broadcast.
That's important.
Yeah, I was frustrated as hell, just like most people are, until I look back on it and go, ah, now I understand. Now I get why they had that process. Because you have to, the way I describe it, Dave, is you have to learn how to be an empath in this business. You have to sit in a producer's chair, in a cameraman's chair, in an editor's chair to appreciate how valuable those positions are so that you can then understand them and that makes you a better forward facing talent. So I did all that stuff. I worked every position in a broadcast that you can, in the control room, out on the studio floor, ripping scripts, running teleprompter, you name it, I did it, all in an effort to make me understand how valuable it is. And again, using your words, how much of a team sport being a sportscaster is. So I did all of that stuff in my formative years at Syracuse.
When I was a sports producer down here at WSPN Channel 7 in Miami for many years, I would get out into the field. And as you know, being in the field comes with numerous problems, technical, weather, traffic, some interesting folks you meet along the way in the real world. And some of the producers back at the station, they may have been excellent producers, but they had this image in their mind of how easy things were, how quickly things could be accomplished, how many things could be accomplished in a live shot or a series of live shots. And you really need to get out in the field a little bit and understand all these challenges that the reporters and producers face. And sometimes they hadn't been out there, and and it made them not as strong at their job as they should have been. So, long way to say, yeah, you definitely have to be able to understand what your teammates doing just to really make you stronger at your job. So, I want to fast forward, and we'll hop around your timeline a little bit. But you've been with the race for a long time, and one of the things when I worked with you and have witnessed is that you have worked with a lot of different analysts, but one of them that you've had at your side for many years is Doug Waechter. And what I've noticed, and I think you must appreciate if you could tell me more about it, is you guys seem to like each other. You guys are friends talking baseball. How valuable is that to you? How did you build that relationship? Was it chemistry from day one? Or tell me about how you and Dougie have had this click going for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's been over a decade now that we've been at each other's side on set. One of the tenets of a good sportscast is having fun. I always tell people if you have fun on the air, your audience is going to have fun watching and listening. And that's one thing that Doug and I didn't have to work too hard on. And I credit him certainly with that. He has a joy for covering baseball, talking about baseball, and broadcasting baseball. And the funny thing is Doug and I have known each other for much longer than when we first started working together. I covered Doug in high school
Oh, wow.
and he was a star quarterback and star pitcher at Northeast High School. Never in a million years did I think we'd be ending up as close friends who get to work together and cover the Tampa Bay Rays that many years later after his playing career was over. It was funny. I still have the clip and save it on my phone of going over highlights of Doug pitching and hitting as a Northeast High Viking
That's amazing.
back in the day. I can't fake that kind of chemistry on the air. That comes from, and look, I'm sure there are people who are interviewed like I'm being interviewed right now and say, "Oh, tell me what it's like to work with so and so," and the standard lines of, "Oh, he's a pro's pro, and we have a great time," and then you wouldn't know that if you knew them off camera. With Doug and I, what you see is what you get. I mean, I give him a hard time. He gives it right back to me. The times that we laugh on the air, those are real belly laughs. We have a blast together because it's not rocket science. It's not brain surgery. We're talking about sports, and we're both sports fans, and we love each other's company. And, we have a vested interest in each other's success. So I'm very fortunate that way. Doug's not the only one, but he's certainly at the top of the list of people who I truly enjoy my time on the air with him. It doesn't feel like work with Doug because we're super tight and we're brothers in arms in more ways than one. It's magic because it's fun and it doesn't feel like it's work or television. It just feels like it's us bringing our friendship and our relationship to all the people who were watching us at that time.
The click, the bond you guys have definitely shines through, and definitely something to be grateful for. Now in 2025, just last season, the Rays had to move from Tropicana Field to Steinbrenner Field, a minor league park, outdoors, sunshine, rain delays. What was that experience like? And even though it probably came with some challenges, what were kind of some new ways to grow what you guys did as a team, as a broadcast team?
Another great question, Dave, because we were forced to rely on each other a lot more. Our studio, uh, without knowing what everyone else's studios are like in the regional sports network world, I've been to some of them, not all of them, but some of them. And I would say we would probably have the best facilities of any baseball team in Major League Baseball. And we didn't have the luxury of using them last year because of the situation that we were faced with. So we had to rely on the aforementioned chemistry a lot more. We didn't have the camera moves and the toys, the technological toys, the production toys that we used to have, because of the situation that the hand that we were dealt. So we relied a lot more on our on-air chemistry than we ever had because that was really all we had at any given time. And it was a certainly a learning curve for us. And going forward, there's going to be even more learning curves because this industry, the tectonic plates of the sportscasting industry are shifting under our feet.
So you've done I don't know how many college basketball games on ESPN, and I do have to ask you about Dick Vitale because I don't know if there's very few people who are more synonymous with a sport, especially as an analyst, than Dick Vitale. So give me a little backdrop of how you got into the play-by-play for ESPN, and then working with a legend like him.
I lied my way into calling college basketball games. As I mentioned earlier, I took a very circuitous route to find my success in sportscasting. Believe it or not, I was working for 6 years at the Home Shopping Network.
There's some items I bought from you that I'm not happy with. I think you owe me like, $75, but I'll let it go. Sorry to interrupt you. Please continue.
I was their sports host and I got to do a lot of really great things and I learned a ton from my time there. But the time that I was there, I also was not happy and satisfied because I knew I had this itch that I needed to scratch and I wasn't able to do it at HSN. So I bet on myself and I left without a safety net. And so I used my networking experience and my relationships that I had built and I parlayed it into an interview with ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut. And the person who I interviewed with said, I could give you a job up here but you're married and you have children and you live in Florida. Do you want to live in Bristol, Connecticut and make $30,000?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, there are things that are happening right now in the industry with ESPN that may dovetail better with your standing right now. Let me get in touch with some people and they'll be in touch with you." And what she meant at the time, this person being Lori Orlando, who is now a vice president at CBS News. She then was a vice president of talent at ESPN. And I got a call from a gentleman by the name of Chris Farrow, who saw my tape without any play by play on it and said, "I really like what I saw. Do you do play by play?" And I lied and said, "Yes, of course I do play by play," knowing that I hadn't called anything but high school sports. And that was 5 years earlier. So what did I do? I used my connections and my relationships, and I cobbled together a basketball game that had taken place a year earlier with a friend of mine who was in the basketball business, and we sat in a studio and faked calling a college basketball game. And that got me my first 2 games on ESPN. 2 games led to 7 games, 7 games led to 20 games, and that was 17 years ago. And the lesson in that, the moral in that is not lie through your teeth to get what you want, but it's just say yes. Say yes to every opportunity that comes your way and figure it out as you do it.
Yeah, say yes and then work like hell to earn it, right?
Right.
I gotta hear a little bit about Dick Vitale. Was there a little bit of a pinch me moment there? What did you learn?
Oh, 100% pinch me moment. I mean, Dick is one of, and I've told him this, he is one of the reasons I fell in love with college basketball. Getting to work with him was absolutely a highlight and still is a highlight of my career. I still remember I was in a hotel room when my phone rang and it was my boss at that time, Jay Levy, and he said I was at that time covering the Missouri Valley Conference, and Wichita State was the cream of the crop in the valley. They also had made a name for themselves on the national basketball scene because they were undefeated in their conference, and no team had done that other than the 1976 Indiana Hoosiers. And the Hoosiers went on to win the national championship that year. And so they were getting a lot of attention. And I was essentially the face of Wichita State basketball because every Saturday, ESPN was putting their games on. No matter who they played, no matter where they played, it was Wichita State and everybody else. And my boss, Jay Levy, called me, and I was waiting for this phone call with imposter syndrome knocking at the door. We're putting a game on ESPN, and because Wichita State is so popular, we're going to bring in our A-list announcers to do the game. I was waiting for it. And instead, what I heard on the other end of that phone call was, we're going to have Dick Vitale do the game, and you're going to do the game with Dick. And I sat there in stunned silence. But Jay believed in me enough to give me this opportunity, knowing that it was the biggest opportunity to date of my career. So I freaked out for a moment, and then I reached out to Dick, and we found out that we had a lot more in common than not. He is Richie from New Jersey who lives in Florida. I am Richie from New Jersey who now lives in Florida. And I mean, not only is he a legend, but he certainly made me feel so comfortable in that game. And he allowed me to feel like I belonged in that level of announcers. And I never looked back after that except to say thank you to Dick. And all these years later now, I still pinch myself because I'm able to call him not only a colleague, not only a mentor, but a friend. And I have never once deleted a single text that I've gotten from Dick Vitale because that's how important he is to me, and that's how much I value his friendship. And I still do to this day.
So you went from a diaper dandy to a primetime player, didn't you?
Solid gold PTPer. That's Dick.
I'm not gonna do my Dick Vitale impression. Everyone's got one. I'm not gonna do it, but I do remember I was a college, student at University of Florida in the '80s, and that was around the time when he was blowing up. We'd see him at a game, and it was like, "Oh, there's a celebrity in the building." He was that big, and then that's 35 years ago, and he's still, he's had these health struggles, but he's still around. He's an amazing person. I haven't had the chance to meet him. You did some hard news stuff covering the Aaron Hernandez story. There's no easy way to go from Dick Vitale to Aaron Hernandez. But the journalism background, I think, is such an underrated component of broadcasting and sport, especially in the sports world. I think it's very easy for young people to see all the glitz and the glamour and the confetti at the end of a championship, but the bedrock is journalism and it has to matter. So you'd gone to Syracuse, you'd worked for the Associated Press in New York as well, and then you find yourself covering Aaron Hernandez, a notorious murderer and a very troubled individual. What was that experience like for you?
I was working for the NFL Network at the time as a correspondent, a reporter. And I remember I was covering the Atlanta Falcons and was getting ready to leave and drive to the Atlanta Hartsfield International Airport and go home after filing my story for NFL Network. And my editor called me and said, "Hey, are you able to divert and go to Boston instead? Because there's something going on. We don't know what it is. It's probably nothing, but we have to have boots on the ground in case there is a newsworthy story there." And the story was the Patriots couldn't find Aaron Hernandez, as strange as that sounded at the time. And so I said, sure. So I changed my flight. I flew from Atlanta to Providence over to the New England Patriots headquarters in Foxborough, Massachusetts. And little did I know that I would be spending the next 10 consecutive days camped outside of Aaron Hernandez's home in North Attleboro, Massachusetts. And what unfolded in front of all of our eyes was the biggest non-sports story in sports since O.J. Simpson. And uh, I had to fall back on everything I learned in my journalism classes at Syracuse, which I hadn't had to use in my professional career for, at that point, over almost 2 decades. But they were so ingrained in me, and I used them without knowing I used them frequently enough that being thrown into that fire pit, so to speak, I acted on instinct. And I happen to be a journalist and a news gatherer much more so than a sportscaster at any stage of those 10 days, and then the what progressed after that, covering the trial itself in Fall River, Massachusetts, and going on, um, all the NFL Network programming as the face of that story. And, really the lesson that I learned there was writing and reporting and just getting the facts straight, no matter what you do as a sportscaster, as a play by play announcer, as an anchor, as a reporter. The most important thing that your job is dependent on is getting the facts right and delivering the facts. Not getting it first, not getting it fast, getting it right. And I certainly had the backing of my editor and my executive producer all the way up the line at NFL Network. They knew that I was standing next to CNN on one side of me and Good Morning America on the other side of me with people who were probably much better trained for that moment than I was, but they walked me through it and they reminded me of it every single day. Don't worry about getting on the air first. Get the facts straight before you come on the air. And because I relied on that, I ended up being the first person to go on national television when Aaron Hernandez was, in fact, walked out in handcuffs and officially, arrested for the murder of two people. And it was surreal every step of the way, Dave. But the more I leaned into and leaned on those journalism foundations, the more I realized I could do this and I'm more than capable of doing it because I didn't have to do too much. I didn't have to sensationalize the story because the story was sensationalized all by itself. What I had to do was be aggressive in my news gathering, know that I belong there just like any other news reporter belonged there, and just deliver the facts in a coherent and understanding way so that the audience could disseminate and digest all of this profound information that seemed to be coming at a breakneck pace once it started coming out. It's hard to say that was a highlight of my career because people died, lives were lost, and families were profoundly impacted. And I had a front row seat to that. And would I want to cover something like that ever again? I don't think so. I am proud of myself as a journalist that I was able to hang in there and do my job to the best of my ability.
It got me thinking, Al Michaels, and I think one of his finest moments that people don't remember so much, he was calling the 1989 World Series, San Francisco, Oakland, and the earthquake happened. And he shifted very quickly from, hey, let's do a World Series game to a
Right.
journalist and helping set the scene with what was going on and what was a real life and death situation with the ballpark, Candlestick Park at the time. I think that's, you know, someone like him. He's not just there to call balls and strikes. He was the right guy in the right place to handle that, and I think it's an under valued skill.
Agreed.
So you and I have a common affinity for the music and work of Mr. Bruce Springsteen. So I was thinking, who is the Bruce Springsteen of the sports world? Someone who's combined long-term success, high integrity, creativity. Who stands out for you as someone that would match the boss for that type of career?
In sportscasting,
Sure, let's keep it to that.
the two that come to mind, you named him just moments ago. I think Al Michaels would be up there. And I think the person who, if I had to choose one person more than anyone, I would say Bob Costas. Because, when I think of Bruce, as I'm sure you do, Dave, I think of not only how prolific he has been, but also how energized he could stay for one concert. No one puts on a concert like Bruce Springsteen can. And, 3 plus hours, even into his 70s, he was able to do that. And I look at Bob Costas and I think Bob has had that longevity. And certainly, Al is he might have lost a digit or two off his fastball, but he could still call NFL games and rise to the occasion in big games like the best of them. And Dick Vitale, for that matter, albeit as an analyst, not as a lead sportscaster. Look, Dick's, closer to 90 than he is 80. And he's still able to summon that kind of energy and that kind of enthusiasm. And that reminds me of the boss just as much because, I haven't seen Bruce on a stage in a couple of years now, but look, the guy is closer to 80 than he is 70, and he's still at the end of his show ripping his shirt open,
Yeah.
dripping with sweat after close to 3 hours. That's reminiscent of Dickie V.
So those guys who are broadcasting well into their 70s and 80s, it's gotta be an inspiration for you. I don't know if you can foresee that far into the future because you have a long way to go, but, could you see yourself like, if you still got your fastball at 75, you'll still have the joy for it. Could you see yourself doing it that long?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know when the end is coming for me, and I'm not egotistical or enough of a narcissist to say I'll know when it's time to go. I'm going to get fired, Dave. Someone will not renew my contract much sooner than it's going to be me saying, "Yeah, I think it's time for me to hang it up." I love what I do so much that I look forward to the day that someone pulls the microphone off of me, away from me, or tells me that it's time to ride off into the sunset because I love what I do, and I don't see a time in certainly the near future where I would think that it's time for me to walk away before someone tells me it's time to walk away.
So one more little game for you here. You've heard of start, bench, cut. Same concept. Well, I'm calling it superstar, all-star, role player. These are things that your resume says you have done, and I'm going to believe them to be true. So rank
Okay.
rank these things: superstar, all-star, role player, skydiving with the Golden Knights, running a marathon, or competing in a triathlon, which includes a marathon. Tell me about those.
Wow.
Are they all true for the first of all?
Yes.
You told us earlier, Mr. Witness, that you
Yeah.
have a propensity to lie. No, I'm just teasing you.
Yeah. White lies.
So tell me about those things.
So skydiving was a once in a lifetime opportunity. I don't know if I would ever do it again because now I have kids. I did it as a 20 something year old and I actually did a story on it. So that was my entree into skydiving. But that was certainly a superstar moment. I mean, without getting too much into the extracurriculars that I've done as a young up and comer and college student, the feeling, the high that I got from skydiving, that buzz lasted with me for days and days and days after I did it. So that stands on its own. I ran the marathon twice and I ran the New York Marathon twice.
Impressive.
And I would not trade those for anything because those showed me what I am capable of athletically and otherwise. I was not a runner. And once I did that, I could look at myself and I could say, even if you never thought of yourself as a runner, you're a runner. And those are memories that I hold near and dear to my heart. The triathlon was a sprint triathlon. So that would rank out of those 3 things that you brought up, those that would rank lowest on my list, but, um, that was also probably the most difficult. It was probably more difficult than training for and running a marathon because those are 3 disciplines and not just 1. And, the feeling that I got coming out of the water was the almost the antithesis of the feeling that I had after I skydived because I thought I was going to pass out. I was apoxic. I thought I didn't have enough oxygen, let alone energy in my body to then go into that changing station and get on a bike and ride and then get off the bike and run like I did. It was, something again that much like skydiving, but completely different than skydiving. That was a one and done for me. I did it once, never do it again. Whereas at least with a marathon, I could say I did it twice and I'll probably never do it again.
I find it all impressive. I'm definitely not courageous enough to jump out of a plane, or they say a perfectly good airplane, as the cliche
Right,
goes, and
right.
never been a runner, so I have to live vicariously. So, Rich, tell folks if they want to find you for the break in and breakthrough training program for sportscasters. Tell people how they can find you and get involved in that.
You've heard of the saying, I put my money where my mouth is. I put my name where my website is. My website is my name because I stand behind this 100%. In that sense, I am still a one man band. So it's richhollenberg.com, two H's, RICH, and the last name Hollenberg. And you could find out anything and everything you want about the cohort and all the other programs that I have developed and am still developing because we're only getting bigger and better from here on out.
Rich, it has been a real pleasure. Thank you for joining me on Sports Media Behind the Scenes. And folks, if you're listening out there, don't forget to follow, subscribe, like, share, and tell people about this podcast. Every little step counts. You can also drop me a note, sportsmediapodcast@gmail.com. Appreciate you stopping by. I'll see you next time.